I'm Krithika, and today I'm going to show you how I made these fantasy sunflower bangles. A full list of tools and supplies is included in the project handout. To get this, go to tinypandora.com and click on the free project PDF link on the page top right corner. To create the cane, I'm starting with a Skinner blend using this template, which is included in your handout. The colors I have are white, cadmium yellow, orange, cadmium red, and cayenne red, all from Primo. I have 2 sheets of clay on the third thickest setting on my Atlas pasta machine. This creates a whole lot of blend. So if you do not want as much, I suggest starting with a single sheet on any thickness you like. Now the template is intended to fill the width of the pasta machine to make it easier to blend, but for the cane we want a narrower blended sheet. And what I'm showing is one way to achieve that by creating a fan-folded Skinner blend block. When creating this block, try to keep the height of the block to a fairly small size. This is one way to create a narrower strip. There are definitely different ways to do this. I'm showing you the size of the block that I started out with just to give you an idea. Depending on the amount of clay that you used, this could be different for you. I'm using a clay roller and my fingers to just make the block thinner so I can pass it through the pasta machine. But you can see I'm still keeping the height of it or the size of the blend pretty narrow. Because I used a thick sheet, this looks a little blotchy, but if you used a thinner sheet to fan fold, yours will look a lot smoother. I'm only going to use part of the sheet that I get out of this. This is a good way to try out a design you're not sure about and then try a different design or do the same one with the rest of the sheet. But I will warn you, the rule of caning is that the less you have of the cane, the more you like it. At least that's how it works for me. I'm going to use the smaller piece there to create the cane in this video and save the larger piece for a different cane. I'm going to divide this piece into 8 smaller pieces. You can eyeball it if you like, but I've never been able to do that. So this folding method works pretty well. You want these pieces to be small enough for you to handle. This is about as small as I go to build a cane. It's about 1.5 inches wide. I have a piece of black clay there on a very thin setting on my pasta machine. This is going to create the dots that you see in the petals. I'm using a stiff blade to cut little strips of black clay and place them on my blended sheet. Mine's a little wider to show you how I'm offsetting the black lines on every blended sheet, but you can make yours closer to the size of the blend itself so you don't have all that extra sticking out there. You can see I'm also offsetting the blended sheet a little bit up and down just to create some variation in the petal. If you make your black sheet the same size, you won't have to do all this weirdness. Once I'm done laying the strips of blend and my black lines, I'm going to press on all sides to force out any air bubbles. I'm also going to pinch the ends of the cane to create a petal shape. Now I'm ready to reduce this. What I'm starting out with is 1 inch wide and 2.5 inches high. Yours will be different depending on the amount of clay you used. For my bangle, I want this to be about 1 inch high. If you're not sure what you want it to be, I would reduce it to about an inch, try it out, and see what works for you. To reduce the cane like this, I pull along the length of the blend and occasionally twist it and wiggle it to get the clay moving. I also pinch on the ends to maintain the petal shape. If the outside gets a little lumpy bumpy along the process, a clay roller can help smooth that out. This may look like a time-consuming process, but it actually goes along very fast once the clay starts moving. You can already see how much longer this is getting. If you want to reduce this without any waste, you can use cane caps available at tinypandora.com. This is my cane reduced down to an inch high. I'm going to save one piece of this to use for the bangle and reduce down another piece to test out some background colors. I'm going to cut off the distorted ends here and cut the cane apart to see what the pattern looks like. Big reveal is always scary when you're recording this. Luckily, this one turned out okay. That smaller piece, I'm going to reduce down some more, cut some slices, and cure them. Then I'm going to put slices on different colored clay and decide which one looks the best. This is a good way to pick a background color if you're not sure what would look good with your cane colors. In my case, I decided that I like the black background best. Now I'm ready to build up my bangle. I'm going to start by creating the innermost layer for the bangle with a sheet of textured black clay and scrap clay. I'm using the same sponge that I used to create the texture to press the sheets together and fuse them. And then I will take the widest template from the Perfect Bangles kit from tinypandora.com and lay it on the textured sheet. Saying the word texture a lot, aren't I? Sorry about that. I'm going to use the corner of my blade to trim against the template. And then I'll move the excess clay around that away. I like to try and peel away the black clay so I can use it for something else. And the rest of the scrap sheet is going to go towards building up the bangle dome later. With this narrow strip, I'm going to cut a clean edge and start laying it against the inside of my metal form from the bangle kit. While doing this, you want the scrap clay side to be against the metal. I'm going to do this until the clay overlaps, and I'll press it gently there, which will create a mark that I can use to trim off the excess. Once I do that, I am going to try and close the seam up with the same texture sponge from before. You want to be a little gentler than I was here while doing this, because I created a giant divot here by pressing too hard. You know what? It's still beautiful and it's on the inside of the bangle, so it's not even the most important part. I'm using my tissue blade to trim away excess clay by pressing it against the edge of the metal form. Then I'm futzing about with it a little bit, checking that the texture is even everywhere. And if you didn't use a texture sponge, you can use a piece of smooth paper to do the same thing. Once I'm happy with this, this is going to go away to cure. Here's my baked clay base. You can see it popped out of the metal form really easily. If yours doesn't want to release as easily, you can use a needle tool to pry the clay away from the metal. And it's easier to do that when the clay is still warm from the oven. Here's my scrap clay sheet on the third thickest setting on my pasta machine. I'm laying out the thinner templates from the kit, and I'm going to cut these out. I use the corner of my tissue blade and glide it along the acrylic edge to cut these out. You want to make these a little bit longer than the length of the template because as you add more and more clay to the bangle, you'll need longer strips to fit on the outside. You don't have to be super neat with this. You can see I went a little wonky with the thinnest strip there, but you'll also be able to do this a lot more easily when you're not worrying about getting your head right in the camera shot. Before I add the clay strips to the baked base, I'm applying some liquid clay here. Anytime you're attaching baked and raw clay together, it's a good idea to use liquid clay as a glue. I like to use Bacon Bond from Sculpey because it's a little bit thicker and things don't slide around as much, but any brand liquid clay will work here. Once the liquid clay is evenly applied, I'm going to start with the widest strip and apply it on the space, centering it as best as I can. You don't have to be too careful with the seams, but try to smooth it so it doesn't split as you work with the bangle. An optional step here is to create a beveled cut on the edge of this widest strip. This just means there's less excess clay to trim off later, and it's totally optional. As you add the other two strips, try to make sure they're as centered as possible. It's also a good idea to put the seams in different spots so there's not just one point of weakness in the bangle. Once you've added the thinnest strip, you're ready to start smoothing with your thumbs. Just keep pressing down, starting from the edge of the thinnest strip down to the baked edge. This is sped up a lot because I don't want you to fall asleep while watching this, but you can see the whole process that I went through to create the beautiful dome on the bangle. You don't have to worry about any nicks and cuts and things like that because we are going to be adding another layer of clay over this. What you do want to watch out for are any big lumps and bumps that will still be obvious after another layer of clay is added. If your thumbs get tired, as mine did while I was doing this, you can use your other fingers to smooth it out. It just takes a couple of rotations to get the basic dome shape created, and after that it's just refining it. If you want a higher dome, you can use a thicker clay sheet to cut strips from. I wanted a fairly smaller one because I'm adding flowers to increase the size of the bangle. Once you're done creating this dome, you might see a little bit of excess clay protruding from the baked edge. That's what happened with mine here. And you can just clean that up by pinching away the excess against the baked edge. Once you've done this and you're happy with the shape, you can bake this and it'll be ready for the last step. The domed base is now baked and ready for the final sheet of clay before the petals come on. I have a sheet of black clay here with some yellow gold glitter and white gold glitter mixed in for added sparkle. Again, I'm adding a good coat of liquid clay before I add the raw clay sheet to the baked base. And don't forget to apply liquid clay all along the bangle edges as well. To apply the clay sheet, I'll start with the center of the bangle and then press it down over the sides. Once the clay is wrapped all around, I'll trim away the excess and use the texture sponge to close up the seam like you've seen me do before. You want to fold the sheet down right over the inner edge where you can trim it later. Make sure you check for any air bubbles on here, especially since this is such a thin sheet. I used about 5th or 6th thinnest setting on my pasta machine. And I use a tissue blade against the inner baked edge to just trim away any excess. Now I'm using a textured sheet here because I like the contrast of the smooth petals and the textured background. But you can make this sheet smooth if you like. I'm using the same texture sponge to press over the edge and make that nice and neat. And I'm checking that I'm covering up any scrap clay here. Once I'm happy with this finish, I'm going to take this away to bake. Now it's time to apply the petals. To apply the petals on the bangle base, I'm using this angle template. First, I'm going to line up the center circle of the bangle with one of the circles on the template. And then I'll use the angle lines there to help me place these tiny gold dot markers on 6 evenly spaced positions on the bangle. This angle template is included in your project PDF. Now, even though I want the flower centers to be along the edge of the bangle, it's hard to access that when the bangle is on a flat surface like this. So I start with these roughly centered dots, and then I'll apply slightly larger gold dots, about 1/4 of an inch in size, along the edge, alternating the edge on each one. Now, if you want to check if 6 flowers will fit comfortably on here, you can test it out with 2 first, like I'm doing here. You want to make sure those petals don't hit each other and are not too far apart. And since mine were okay, I'm going ahead with applying the remaining flower centers and peeling off the marker dots. That gold clay is rolled out at about 5th or 6th thinnest setting on my pasta machine. You want something that's kind of close to the thickness of the petal slices that you use. Before I apply my final petal slices, I need to apply some liquid clay again to the baked base. You know the drill by now. I like to apply it small sections at a time, just so the rest of it doesn't get gunky. And this is the way I like to apply the petals. I'll start with the center one, and then I'll apply the corner petal, and then fit the center one. When applying petals along the bangle edge like that, make sure you curve it over the curved edge so it doesn't stick out. You may have to play around with this petal placement a little bit. I found that 1/4 inch circle in the center helped all the petals meet evenly. You may have to adjust that. And occasionally you might have to use the edge of your nail or a tool of some kind to make a little more room to fit a petal in. Once all the petals are applied, I like to use a tiny steel roller. You can use a knitting needle also, or a cane bender here. But I'm just going to roll over all the petals very gently, just to make sure that it's in total contact with the base. You don't want any part of these petals sticking out. They may catch on something and break. This also smooths out any fingerprints you might have left on there. Once this is done, I'm going to apply another circle of gold clay, slightly larger than the one I used for the center, and this will just cover up any smushing or weirdness at the center of those flower halves. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this. I just feel it looks like a more complete flower this way. Once you've applied all of these, an optional step is to texture them. I like to use a small ball stylus to do this, just for some added interest, and I also think it looks more like a sunflower this way. Make sure you're holding your bangle very carefully now, because it's easy to smush any of these petals at this point. Although if it does happen, you can just peel that off and apply a new petal, no harm done. You can see how I'm careful to lift it up and hold it away from the tile below my hands. Once you're happy with the textured centers and you've smoothed all the petals, this bangle is ready to go for its final curing. Finally, the moment you thought would never come. The bangle is baked and complete and ready to wear. I really like the way these bright petals contrast with a black background. But if you're not a fan of that, why not try on a pearl or white background like this? This bangle was made following the exact same process with a slightly different petal cane. I hope you like this project and will give it a try.